You can't bring children into this house, Mara. This place was built for silence. That's what Elliot Vance told himself every morning as he walked down the marble stairs of his Sao Paulo mansion, perfect suit, perfect hair, and a hollow look that never changed. Money had filled every room with luxury, but not one corner with warmth. 5 years ago, he locked a small white door painted with blue clouds and never turned the handle again. Across town, in a cramped apartment that shook with laughter, Mara Silva fought a very different battle. 28, exhausted, and raising 4-year-old twins alone. Lily and Nina, she cleaned houses to keep rent paid and food on the table. When daycare shut down unexpectedly, Mara's stomach dropped. She had no backup, no savings. Only a risky decision: take the girls to her last job of the day, Elliot's mansion, and beg them to be invisible. They lasted 15 minutes. Bare feet slapped across cold marble giggles, echoing like a crime. Elliot followed the sound, heart pounding, until he froze 2 identical little girls sliding down his hallway like it was a playground. Mara rushed in, trembling, ready to be fired. But instead of anger, Elliot asked quietly, "Are they yours?" Then the impossible happened. He let them stay. Later, curiosity pulled the twins toward the cloud-painted door. Inside was a nursery untouched toys, a waiting crib, a dream preserved like a tomb. Elliot stepped in and broke, confessing the child he never had, the wife who left the silence that swallowed him whole. And when little Nina placed a toy car in his shaking hands and whispered, then, "We're here now," something in that mansion finally breathed again. "Please, girls, just today. Be quiet. Be invisible." Mara knelt in front of Lily and Nina, her voice steady, even as fear pressed hard against her chest. The words tasted like guilt. Mothers weren't supposed to ask their children to disappear, but rent was overdue. The fridge was nearly empty, and missing work wasn't an option. The twins nodded with serious little faces, fingers crossed like it was a game. Mara knew better. Silence and 4-year-old twins had never belonged in the same sentence. The bus ride to Elliot Vance's mansion felt longer than usual. Every stop tightened her nerves. She clutched their small hands, whispering quiet prayers between the rattles of the city. By the time the iron gates opened, her heart was already racing. Elliot's house wasn't just big, it was sacredly quiet. The kind of silence that made you afraid to breathe too loudly. She led the girls through the service entrance, past endless marble and glass, and tucked them into a tiny utility room with an old television and a worn couch. "Stay here," she whispered, crouching to their level. "No running, no noise. Please." "We promise," Lily said. "Super quiet," Nina added, smiling too brightly. Mara walked away with cleaning supplies in shaking hands, listening harder than she scrubbed. Every minute that passed without a sound felt like borrowed time. 15 minutes. Then 20. Too quiet. Her mother's instinct screamed before her ears heard anything, before the soft giggle echoed faintly through the mansion. Panic hit like ice water. She dropped the cloth and ran. What she didn't know was that at the same moment in a glass-walled office upstairs, Elliot Vance froze mid-signature. The sound reached him like a crack in reality. Small footsteps, light, laughter, impossible joy. His chest tightened. That house didn't hold children. It hadn't for years. It wasn't supposed to. As Mara raced down the corridor, shame burning her throat. The two worlds she had tried so desperately to keep apart were already colliding. And nothing, no amount of money, no rules, no locked doors could stop what was about to be awakened in that silent house. The laughter didn't stop. It spilled down the marble corridor in bright, careless bursts, echoing off walls that had only ever known footsteps and silence. Elliot Vance stood frozen in his office doorway, one hand gripping the doorframe as if the house itself had shifted beneath him. Children. In his home. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be. He followed the sound slowly, each step heavy, as if he were walking into a memory he had buried on purpose. Then he turned the corner, and there they were, two little girls. Identical. Barefoot. Sliding across the polished floor like it was a frozen lake. Their curls bounced, their laughter sharp and alive, cutting straight through the emptiness that had ruled the mansion for years. Elliot forgot how to breathe. The twins noticed him at the same time. They stopped. Completely still. Wide eyes, tiny chests rising fast. "Hi," one of them said finally. Her voice small but brave. "Do you live here?" Before Elliot could find words, hurried footsteps thundered behind him. "Mr. Vance, please, I'm so sorry." Mara rushed forward, breathless panic written across her face. She pulled the girls behind her instinctively, hands trembling as she spoke. The daycare had closed. She had no one. She begged. She promised it would never happen again. Every sentence sounded like a goodbye. Elliot barely heard her at first. All he could see were the children peeking out from behind her legs. Real children. Warm. Curious. Alive. His home had never held that kind of presence, not even when he'd imagined it might. Something tight and forgotten shifted painfully in his chest. "They're yours?" he asked quietly. Mara nodded, bracing herself. Elliot knelt slowly, lowering himself to their level. The girls watched him closely, unsure, but curious. "Were you being quiet?" he asked. Mostly one admitted. The other giggled. For the first time in years, the corner of Elliot's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Finish your work," he said, standing again, his voice steady but changed. "They can stay." Mara blinked, stunned. And just like that, the impossible happened. Not with anger, not with punishment, but with a choice that cracked open a door Elliot had kept locked far longer than he ever meant to. The library was never meant for noise. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stood like solemn witnesses, leather chairs, untouched, a Persian rug preserved as if footsteps might damage its dignity. Elliot Vance had always liked this room, because it felt controlled, orderly, predictable quiet. But now 2 small backpacks rested on the floor, a pair of mismatched shoes lay near the rug, and soft whispers floated through the air like something forbidden. Lily and Nina sat cross-legged, toys spread carefully between them, trying their best to honor a promise they barely understood. They spoke in hushed voices, giggling into their hands when excitement bubbled too high. It wasn't silence, but it was effort, and that mattered more than Elliot expected. From the doorway unseen, he watched. He told himself he was just checking, just making sure nothing was broken, just making sure rules were followed. But minutes passed, then more, and he didn't move. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, as if afraid that stepping inside might shatter the fragile moment unfolding in his own house. The girls didn't know he was there. They built stories with plastic figures, invented kingdoms on the rug, argued softly over who was the queen and who was the guard. Their world was small, imperfect, alive. And as Elliot listened, something unfamiliar settled into his chest. Not pain this time, but a warmth that scared him more than loneliness ever had. Downstairs, Mara cleaned faster than she ever had before. Heart still racing, gratitude tangled tightly with fear. She expected a call, a dismissal, a door slamming shut on the only income she had. But instead, all she heard, faint, distant, almost unreal, were muffled laughs drifting through the house. Laughter. In that mansion. Elliot finally exhaled, realizing his jaw had been tight for years, not minutes. The silence he once protected suddenly felt cruel, like a rule that punished joy for daring to exist. His home hadn't been peaceful. It had been empty, and for the first time as children breathed life into the walls he had built to keep the world out. Elliot Vance wondered quietly, honestly, what else he might have been wrong about all along. They weren't looking for trouble. They were looking for wonder. Lily was the first to notice it, the white door at the end of the corridor painted with soft blue clouds that didn't belong in a house like this. Everything else was dark wood and sharp lines. That door felt different, like it was waiting. "Look," she whispered. Nina stepped closer, her small fingers hovering over the golden handle. "Do you think it opens?" It did. The door creaked softly, as if exhaling after holding its breath for years. What waited on the other side stole the air from their lungs. A nursery. Perfect, frozen in time. A white crib with a canopy of tiny stars. Shelves lined with unopened toys. Stuffed animals still wrapped in plastic. A rocking chair by the window untouched, patient. The room smelled faintly of paint and dust hope preserved too long. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, stepping inside like she was entering a church. They didn't know this room had a name. They didn't know it had been locked the day a dream died. Down the hall, Mara felt it before she saw it. That sharp, sinking instinct every mother knows. She followed the sound of giggles until she reached the open door. And then she froze. The nursery. The forbidden room. "Girls," she said, her voice breaking. "Out. Now." Panic rushed through her as she knelt, hands shaking, while she gathered toys back into boxes that had never been meant to open. This wasn't mischief. This was something sacred, something fragile. And she knew deep in her bones that this mistake would cost her everything. Footsteps sounded behind her, slow. Heavy. Elliot stood in the doorway, his face drained of color, eyes fixed not on the children, but on the room. The crib. The clouds. The life that never came. But never. 5 years, he whispered, barely audible. His knees gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by dreams wrapped in cardboard and plastic, and he cried, not quietly, not politely, but the kind of cry that comes from years of swallowed grief. "I just wanted to be a father," he broke out. "That's all I ever wanted." Mara couldn't move. The girls clung to her silent now. Then Nina stepped forward, picked up a small toy car, and placed it gently in Elliot's trembling hand. Then, "We're here now," she said. And in that moment, the room finally remembered what it was built for. Elliot didn't answer right away. He stared at the toy car resting in his palm, the plastic warm from Nina's small fingers, as if it carried a heartbeat of its own. For a long moment, the room held its breath. The nursery that had once been a monument to loss now felt unbearably alive. Slowly, carefully, Elliot reached out. He wrapped his arms around Nina first, hesitant, unsure, like a man afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. Then Lily joined in pressing her cheek against his shoulder, small arms holding him with the effortless trust only children possess. And something inside Elliot finally gave way, not shattered this time, but softened. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice thick. "I didn't know how to come back here." Mara knelt beside them, tears slipping freely now. She saw not a powerful millionaire or a distant employer, but a broken man, allowing himself to feel again, allowing himself to be seen. And in that quiet circle on the nursery floor, something sacred was being rewritten. Elliot wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed, then let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "These toys," he said softly, gesturing around the room, "they were never meant to stay in boxes." He looked at the girls. "You can play. All of them." Their eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" Lily asked. "Really," he said, and this time he smiled. Not a careful one, not a practiced one, but a real smile that reached his eyes. The room filled with motion, boxes opened, dolls freed, wheels spun across the floor, and Elliot stayed right there, sitting cross-legged on the rug, in a suit that suddenly felt ridiculous, learning the rules of a game he didn't know how to play yet, but desperately wanted to. Down the hallway, the mansion listened. For the first time in 5 years, it heard laughter where grief once lived. And Elliot Vance, surrounded by scattered toys and 2 impossible little girls, realized something quietly profound. Healing hadn't come from fixing the past. It had come from letting the present in. By the afternoon, the mansion no longer felt like it belonged to one man. It felt shared. Elliot stayed with Lily and Nina, while Mara returned to her work, though her hands trembled as she cleaned. She expected to hear shouting, rules, boundaries snapping back into place. Instead, what drifted through the halls were sounds so unfamiliar they made her stop more than once, questions asked, in a clumsy adult voice, sudden bursts of laughter, the thud of toys hitting the floor. In the nursery, Elliot sat on the rug jacket, discarded tie, loosened sleeves rolled up like he was preparing for something important. Nina tried to explain the rules of a game she invented on the spot. Lily corrected her. They argued. They laughed. And Elliot listened with absolute seriousness, nodding as if these rules mattered more than any contract he had ever signed. "Am I doing it right?" he asked, holding a stuffed bear upside down. The girls burst into giggles. "No," Lily said. "He's the guard, not the king." "Oh," Elliot replied solemnly. "My mistake." Mara watched from the doorway, later unseen. The sight hit her harder than she expected. This man who barely spoke above a whisper, who guarded silence like armor, was sitting on the floor completely unprotected. And he looked happy, awkward, alive. When lunchtime came, Elliot insisted they stay. The kitchen, once a place of unused perfection, filled with movement. The girls marveled at the size of the table more than the food itself. Outside in the garden, no one ever used Lily, and Nina ran freely across the grass, their laughter carried by the wind. Elliot stood watching, hands in his pockets, something tight loosening in his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man visiting his own life from the outside. He felt present, and as the sun dipped lower and 2 small shadows ran circles around him, Elliot Vance understood something quietly irreversible had begun, not a favor, not a coincidence, but the slow, undeniable becoming of a family. The doorbell shattered the calm, like glass breaking in water. Elliot was still smiling when he opened it, until the smile disappeared completely. Standing there, flawless and cold in a tailored coat, was Vivian Hale. His past. His silence. The woman who had once told him that children were impractical, that love should be quiet, contained convenient. Her heels clicked against the marble as she stepped inside without invitation, eyes scanning the house with sharp suspicion. "This place feels different," she said. It was, and she knew it. Her gaze stopped at the garden beyond the glass doors, at scattered toys, soap bubbles clinging to the grass, a tiny pink shoe by the step. Her expression hardened. "You've had visitors." Before Elliot could respond, Mara appeared at the staircase, cleaning bucket in hand. The contrast was immediate. Simple clothes, tired eyes, quiet dignity. Vivian's lips curved into something sharp. "The maid," she asked dismissively. "Fax cleaner," Mara corrected calmly. "And I work here." Vivian laughed softly, venom wrapped in silk. "So this is it," she said to Elliot. "You replaced me with a woman like this." The words cut deep, but not where she expected. Elliot stepped forward, his voice steady, dangerous in its calm. "You don't speak to her like that." Vivian turned incredulous. "You're defending her." "I'm defending what's right." The twins' laughter floated in from outside, and Vivian stiffened. "You let children in here," she hissed. "After everything." Elliot's jaw tightened. "They brought life back into this house. Something you never wanted." Vivian's mask slipped. "You always wanted impossible things. A family, a happy home." "No," Elliot said quietly. "I wanted something real." Her eyes flicked to Mara, then to the garden where Lily and Nina ran freely, unaware of the storm inside. For the first time, Vivian understood. It wasn't about the woman. It was about the children. You'll regret this, she warned softly. Elliot didn't hesitate. The only thing I regret is letting you convince me that love was something to avoid. Vivian left with her pride in pieces, heels echoing like a closing chapter. And as the door shut behind her, Elliot turned back toward the garden, toward laughter, toward truth, toward the family he was no longer afraid to choose. The shift didn't happen loudly. There was no dramatic speech, no grand announcement, just a quiet, irreversible choice settling deep in Elliot's chest. Vivian's words still echoed in the air after the door closed, sharp and poisonous, but they no longer held power. Elliot stood still for a moment, listening not to the silence she left behind, but to the sound that replaced it. Laughter. Light. The steady rhythm of life continuing without her permission. Mara gathered the girls instinctively when she sensed the tension ease her body still guarded, ready to leave if she had to. Years of survival had taught her that kindness could be temporary, generosity fragile. She didn't expect what came next. Elliot turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "You don't ever have to feel unwelcome here," he said. "Not you. Not them." Mara looked up, searching his face for hesitation. There was none. Outside, Lily tripped and fell into the grass, laughing instead of crying. Elliot moved without thinking, crossing the lawn, lifting her gently, brushing dirt from her knees like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nina wrapped her arms around his leg, claiming him without asking. Something inside Mara cracked open. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was choice. When Vivian had stood in that house, dripping with status and cruelty, Elliot had not wavered. He hadn't hidden behind money or reputation. He hadn't chosen what looked right. He had chosen what felt true. "I won't apologize for them," he had said. And he meant it. That was the moment Mara understood whatever this was becoming. It wasn't fragile. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't something that would disappear the first time the world disapproved. Elliot Vance had spent years believing family was something denied to him. Now standing in the grass with two small girls clinging to his hands and a woman watching him with cautious hope, he finally saw the truth. Family wasn't something you were born into. It was something you stood up for, even when it cost you everything else. The fall came quietly, but it hit hard. It started with a phone call, then another, and another. Mara stood in the small kitchen of her apartment phone pressed to her ear, listening to polite voices explain that her services were no longer needed. No explanations. No second chances. Just distance. Suspicion. The kind that clings to people like her more easily than it ever touched people like Vivian. By the time the last call ended, Mara slid down against the wall and cried silently so the girls wouldn't hear. Rent was due. Groceries were low. Pride told her to keep going. Fear whispered that she was running out of ground. She still showed up at Elliot's house the next day, not because she wanted help, but because Lily and Nina begged to see him. Elliot knew something was wrong the moment he saw her face. He waited until the girls were outside, chasing bubbles across the lawn before speaking. "They fired you," he said gently. Mara nodded. "They think I stole something. I didn't. But it doesn't matter what's true. Only what sounds believable." Something dark and furious settled behind Elliot's eyes, not at her, but for her. "Stay," he said. She looked up confused. "I'm finishing early today." "No," he interrupted softly. "I mean stay here, with me, with us." Mara shook her head instantly. "I can't. People will talk. They'll say I'm using you. That I planned this." "Let them," Elliot said, stepping closer. "They don't live our lives." "Our lives," she whispered. He exhaled, steadying himself. "I don't want you here because you need help. I want you here because I need you. Because this house came alive when you and the girls walked in. Because for the first time in years, I wake up wanting to come home." Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then, before doubt could steal his courage, Elliot said the words that had been forming for weeks. "Marry me." Her breath caught. "Elliot, that's—" "I know it's fast," he said. "But it's real. I love you. I love the girls. Not as a rescue, not as a mistake, as a family." Mara's hands trembled as she covered her mouth, fear and hope colliding in her chest. Love had found her before and failed. But this time it wasn't asking her to disappear, it was asking her to stay. The answer didn't come that day, but when it did, it changed everything. A week later, Mara stood in the doorway of Elliot's mansion with 2 small suitcases and 2 even smaller hands clutched in hers. Lily squeezed her fingers. Nina bounced on her heels, eyes wide, already calling the place home in her head. Mara's heart pounded not with excitement alone, but with fear, of judgment, of failure, of believing again. Elliot met them halfway down the hall, not as a man waiting to be obeyed, but as someone welcoming his family home. "No rush," he said softly. "We'll take this one step at a time." And they did. The mansion didn't transform overnight. Some mornings were awkward. Some nights Mara lay awake listening to unfamiliar quiet, wondering if this peace could last. But every morning, the girls' laughter echoed through the halls, and Elliot was there making breakfast, badly tying shoelaces wrong, learning as he went. The nursery with the cloud-painted walls became the girls' room. The toys were no longer untouched. Dolls lay abandoned mid-story. Crayons rolled under furniture. The room breathed again. Elliot insisted on routines. Breakfast together, school drop-offs, dinner at the table every night. Not because he needed order, but because he needed presence. And Mara slowly, carefully allowed herself to rest, to study again, to dream again, to believe she deserved more than survival. 3 months later, on a quiet December evening, Elliot knelt in the living room, the Christmas tree glowing behind him. Lily and Nina stood proudly on either side, holding a small velvet box like it was treasure. "Say yes," Nina whispered seriously. Mara laughed through tears she didn't try to hide anymore. "Yes," she said. "I choose this. I choose us." The wedding was simple. The vows were honest. The family was real. And the mansion, once a monument to silence, became proof that broken places don't need to be erased. They need to be filled with courage, with choice, with love that stays. The mansion no longer slept in silence. Years after the first laugh echoed through its halls, Elliot would sometimes pause at the top of the stairs and listen to footsteps running late for school, to dishes clinking in the sink, to arguments over who left toys on the floor. Sounds he once would have paid anything to escape, now the sounds he couldn't live without. What changed his life wasn't a miracle or a grand plan. It was 2 little girls who weren't supposed to be there. A mother who walked into his house out of desperation, not ambition. A locked room opened not by force, but by innocence. Elliot learned that family doesn't arrive when life is perfect. It arrives when life is cracked wide open. The twins didn't heal him by being quiet or well-behaved. They healed him by being real, by running where silence ruled, by touching dreams that had been left untouched for too long. And Mara didn't save him by asking for anything, she saved him by staying honest even when fear told her to run. The greatest gift Elliot ever received didn't come wrapped in wealth or control. It came wrapped in chaos, courage, and trust. And maybe that's the truth we forget. Sometimes the things we call problems are actually answers in disguise. Sometimes the doors we keep locked are the ones holding our healing. And sometimes the family we're meant to have doesn't look like what we imagined, but feels exactly like home. Love isn't about having everything ready. It's about choosing to stay when it's not. If this story touched something in your heart, maybe it's because you needed to hear it today. Tell me in the comments, what door in your life have you been afraid to open? Like this video if it moved you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what really matters. Because healing begins the moment we stop running from love and let it in.